Welcome to the Confluence cast presented by Columbus Underground. We are a weekly Columbus-centric podcast focusing on the civics, lifestyle, entertainment, and people of our city. I'm your host, Tim Fulton. This week, cities don't run on autopilot. Every decision, every budget, every policy, every vote is shaped by the people who step up and lead. A few months ago, I decided to see what it would take to be one of those people, and I wasn't alone. Densil Porteous and I were two of the many candidates who applied for an open Columbus City Council seat. The process was eye-opening, not just in terms of how appointments work, but in how civic engagement and political power actually play out in real time. In this episode, Densil and I talk about what we experienced, what we learned, and what it says about how leadership is chosen in our city. If you've ever wondered how decisions get made, or even considered getting involved yourself, this episode offers a rare look inside the process. You can get more information on what we discussed today in the show notes for this episode at theconfluencecast.com. Enjoy the interview. Sitting down here with Densil Porteous, the executive director of Stonewall Columbus, and current nominee, is that fair to say? You are running for District 7. You and I both threw our hat into what turned out to be a fairly large ring.
A large ring.
Of folks that sought the nomination to fill the remainder of Shayla Favor's District 7 seat.
Which would 30 people.
Which would have been for a year. So yeah, I think it was 31 people applied. We are recording this on Thursday, the Monday after we both discovered that it was not us that was chosen. We're not going to get into much of Densil's candidacy today because I wanted to give the opportunity to the other folks who are running. We are hosting a panel with a couple of different community organizations at the end of February. We will link to that in the show notes for folks to find out about it. But I just kind of wanted to process, download maybe a bit of therapy around what that process was like for us. So this was not your first time.
No.
This was your third.
This is number 3. So I was not lucky number 3 either.
Of seeking that appointment.
Yes.
So first of all, why did you decide to do it? Was it just the same as before?
Yeah, the first 2 times, honestly, was more of a I've got time, so why not? It wasn't anything more than that, right? The first time it was, I have the capacity. I believe in civil service. I believe in obligation to give back to community. So why not do it this way? The second time, sort of a similar thing. Wow, my job is not too demanding right now. I wasn't a parent at the time.
Okay,
I was single, so life was also in a different perspective. I think this time it was a convergence. I was going to say confluence. One, of a bunch of different things, right? I mean, we're coming post-election. I'm sitting there at home and I'm like, this has been a really tumultuous last couple of months. I was also inspired by the VP running and thinking, you know what, she's representative of an international identity. Her parents, both parents being international, myself being a naturalized American citizen from Jamaica. The fact that I had my daughter who was watching and saying and talking about the new presidential administration, like she knew everything about them. There were lots of just these moments of fear that I started to have and wanting to make sure that, again, in this time and submitting my interest in it, that my daughter saw that there was someone in her community, if not just singularly her dad, who could be and speak positively about people. We didn't have to be out there tearing people down. That was important for her to see. But also just across the Columbus community, I think for me was also a moment of representation. District 7 is the largest district in Columbus. It has the most diverse representation. It is truly representative of Columbus as a whole. And so all of my facets of identity felt like, hey, as a Black, queer, new American parent who has a kid in Columbus Public Schools, who is concerned about things, who runs a nonprofit organization here, why not?
Okay.
It seemed like the time.
How was that process different? And we'll go through like what you and I experienced, but what did you experience that I didn't? Like, what was different about the first 2 times?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a city, this is the thing that I think I'm most excited about. As a city, we have grown, and growth in terms of how we govern, but also how many people literally just live here.
Yeah.
So the first time we're thinking at the time, we were probably the 18th largest city in the country, 18th, 9th, right? And then second time, you can see that the growth is happening. And by this time, depending on who you talk to, we're the 14th or 13th largest city in the country. And the process by which we identified council people changed in that time.
Yeah.
So we went from a general sort of anybody represents all city, no district based, to now a district based system.
Right.
Which allows also how we think about governing to be done differently. That allows an opportunity for someone truly from that one single district to rise up and say, I've been here, I'm committed to being here. I know what this area, it's like your neighborhood. I know what my neighbors want and need. So why wouldn't I raise my hand to serve that?
And this is an excellent political answer that you're giving. I guess were you interviewed?
It's a real answer.
No, it is a real answer,
No,
but it's also
those,
nice,
yeah.
right?
But those are all the things that happened and,
Yeah.
and changed. I talked about that. The first time, the first time I applied, I was an unknown entity for the most part, I guess, and so I didn't get the in council interview with everyone. I didn't speak at that point in time. The second time,
did you testify the first time?
No.
Okay.
No, I did not.
Were there finalists?
No, there were not. It was a very different process.
That's what I'm getting at.
Cheers.
Yeah.
But that was the growth of the city, right? So at that time, governing was done differently. The appointment process was different at the time. So at the time, there was no need to have a public conversation or a moment. City councils would be able to seek nominations, and then they would go into executive session and make a determination about who they would pick.
Okay.
And so that was what it was then. People in the city complained and said this is ridiculous,
right?
Because also during that time, the mayor could also appoint people to council,
right?
And then that policy changed, and then the second time there were interviews. So the second time was when they introduced a process of being more public, so having public comment.
Also before the district system.
This was right as the district system was being implemented.
Yes. So as I jokingly think about it, this is the time when council moved around the city to make sure they were supplanted into
joking, they did it.
Yeah.
Oh.
I jokingly referred.
And
Shannon, Council President Hardin has said in this room, "Yep, I had to move."
And that was the transition from a general representational body to a district body. So in essence, if you wanted to keep your seat, then you should be living in a district that you wanted to represent.
So you did get interviewed the second time.
Public comment.
You were able to testify.
Different. Yes, correct.
You got to do your 3 minutes then.
Correct.
Do you remember how many folks there were? Because this was also still an at-large seat.
It was at large at that time, but that was the year that the district elections had just happened.
Okay.
So they had just happened. They were being implemented during that period of time.
The transition.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was during that January session where interviews were happening and the new session of council was coming on, if you want to call it that. That was when they determined who would be, that was when the district sort of mapped out, and that was also when they determined who would have how many years terms. So, some council members now have 2-year terms, and some have, I think, 4-year terms or something. But
it's supposed to end up all working itself out. And Shayla, Councilwoman, or
Councilperson Favor
was
in a 2-year term seat,
right? And that was simply a function of drawing straws.
Correct. Correct.
So our process, we applied. Mm-hmm. We had roughly a month to apply. We were told at the time, and please gut check me if any of this is incorrect. We were told at the time that once the city clerk certified our applications, that they would then go to council, and that 3 days after that, each council member had the ability to submit up to 3 finalists.
It might have been a little more than 3 days after, but I don't remember how many.
Yeah, but it was some defined amount of time.
Very specific.
But also sort of what the reading between the lines there was, the city clerk would hand over these applications and that would be the time to interview us in order to determine whether we should be finalists.
Correct. And now, and council, and I believe in all three of the times that I've submitted my expression of interest, council has always had the opportunity to reach out and speak to those candidates on a one-to-one basis. So a member of council might reach out and say, hey, I'd like to...
Yes, to be clear, not an executive session, like literally go to their office.
Yes, correct, and have a conversation. And normally what I believe has happened is that they may, it seems as if one member of council is assigned to speak to a particular representative to say, hey, go and have a conversation with that candidate.
Okay.
So that's what I think that's what I've felt.
Did you experience that in the past?
That usually one council person would chat with me. Yes.
Oh, okay. But you did not experience it this time, right?
I did.
You did?
I did. I had a...
Nobody reached out to me.
I had a conversation. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I was also more aggressive in it this time.
Okay.
So the last two times they reached out. This time I didn't wait for anyone to reach out.
Oh, interesting.
And so I had reached out to schedule appointments.
I should have been bugging you about this earlier.
No, well, I mean, it was more because I was reaching out less about the interim moment and more about the permanent moment.
Okay.
So for me, it was I made this announcement. I've done both announcements, but I'm also letting you know.
And let's be explicit here. Yeah. You made an announcement. I am seeking the appointment.
Yes.
And I am seeking to run
Correct.
In a general election. Well, a primary and then a general. But you are seeking to run as well.
Yeah.
So skipping ahead a bit, it goes from those 31 folks down to 10. We were then given, I think, like a week and a half it was that following Wednesday. It was basically, hey, you're a finalist, congratulations, and let us know if you would like to give testimony at this special session next week. 9 of us did that. The other person who did not do it submitted a comment, made a statement that was submitted to council. What'd you think about that? Us 10, or us 9, I guess. Because you had not gone through, or you did the second time.
Yeah, I did the second time.
Was it as many? It wasn't nearly as many the first time you did it.
I think it was like 17, and then it maybe boiled down to 7 or 8. I can't remember what the number was. Comparable. I will say that the depth of candidates and richness of experience was much greater this time.
Okay.
I was also immeasurably excited to see the number of people who expressed interest. Because before, when it was general, anybody from the city could do it, and to think maybe only 17 to 20 people submitted for an open seat seemed really crazy.
I didn't think about that, because it's basically so there's 9 districts, and like if you take 1 times 9, it's 9 times as many people that were eligible.
Correct.
And you only had 17.
Correct.
But in this case, and what is that?
And we actually had over 40 submissions, and those turned out to not be eligible for whatever reason.
Oh,
and
that's
then it
right.
boiled down to those 31.
And I will say the city clerk had to reach out to me I rent my home, and the city clerk had to reach out to me and say, hey, I need another copy of your lease to indicate that you've actually been there a full year. Which was, I'm glad they're doing the diligence, right? So what does that say to you, that participation was greater? Does it reflect greater civic engagement? Does it reflect greater scrutiny on the process? Simply more folks wanting to get involved? Is it a testament to what you brought up earlier, that we are at a political time where folks want to do what they can to be involved? What would you attribute that engagement to?
Yes, and yes. I really do think it's again, convergence, confluence of all these different things that are happening in the moment, right? I remember, I don't remember who I was exchanging information with, but it was sort of like, at first no one was submitting anything. It was quiet. It was like, what's going on?
Okay.
And then I know I made my public, hey, I'm doing it. And then there was a lot of okay, yeah, let's go, right? There was almost a waterfall effect or whatever. Maybe someone was waiting to see or whatever it was. But I think also people needed to sort of feel like, yes, this could possibly be different than it has been in the past, right?
Okay.
Because what we have known in the past is that we've always felt like they've got someone already that they've chosen. So what's the point, right? Like,
and I'm going to give you credit here so that you don't have to take it. Do you think that your public announcement gave people maybe a little bit more awareness that this is something that is open and available to them, and that it sort of gave them permission, like, oh, you should be engaging here?
I can say yes. I will say yes. I'll lean into that. And I know just looking at the data from my post, right? There was a tremendous amount of engagement.
Yeah.
And the anecdotal information was, I wasn't aware. Right. So people didn't actually even know that the interim seat was a thing. They didn't even know there was a process. So there's some truth to say that, yes, right, like that engagement allowed people to start opening their eyes and saying, I didn't realize, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then asking questions. Is this different than running for the office? Can you run for the office if you're interim? Like, there are all these questions that seem to come out that no one understood or knew prior to that moment.
And I do think, I'm not skipping ahead, but I will say in my interview with them, a big part of the conversation was around communication, was around how do we make sure that folks know about not only the work that we're doing, but how they can engage with us, and how, like, that participatory aspect.
And I had a lot of the same with them, right?
Yeah.
I like to sometimes believe myself as a communications professional, among other things, but we understand the importance of communicating a message, a moment, so that we can get engagement. And I think in particular, when we're thinking about community engagement in politics, we need to communicate with our community all the more. And I said very loudly in my interview in chambers with council, I said to them, the biggest issue that I see is that you all don't communicate and communicate well enough, right? Because there's so many questions. If people have so many questions, there must be missing information, which means a lack of communication.
Yeah.
Right. And so it is exciting to me. I continually get excited every time I see a new person saying, I think I'm going to do this. It's exciting. Because clearly you're learning something, you're hearing something, and we're seeing engagement happen. And my hope is that, me raising my hand along with those other 30 people and the 10 and the boil down, right, that we inspire the same thing to happen in other districts across the city, that we inspire people to say, oh yeah, I can too, right? Like that's what, right, this is all about, right? Like civic engagement is about someone saying, I believe I have a voice, I believe I can speak up for my community, and yeah, I can too. Like,
okay.
And so I think a lot of that happened and continues to happen, and I hope I see more people sort of raising their hands to do stuff.
At that session where we were providing testimony, we were given 3 minutes. The public was also given the ability to come in and speak on the behalf of other candidates. I think you had
submit written comment.
Written comment, which I didn't follow up and see if there was much submitted. But at the beginning of that session, Council President Hardin got up and he essentially gave 2 check boxes.
Yes.
And those check boxes were that he wanted to see a black woman fill this seat, acknowledging the fact that the portion of our population that is black women is at least enough to have 1 seat, first of all, and 2, that he did not want to appoint someone who is going to seek re-election. I believe that re-election piece is around a critique of council that in the past they would appoint people after, almost sometimes immediately after an election, and that they then would be basically reelected easily because they're an incumbent. And so there was this perception that they were just sort of stacking the deck.
Yes. But this is reality, so I don't think it's perception. I mean, it's reality.
Okay.
Because while council elections are nonpartisan, council is partisan.
Yes.
And so you have a Democratic body of representatives who are there,
both capital and lowercase d.
Correct.
Right.
And so what has happened in the past is that the candidates have been sort of slotted, right? Like that interimly they have said, here is the interim person. We're picking this person because we believe that's the person we also want to keep around, keep on the ticket, and then run that person.
Right.
So that has been. I commend Council President Hardin for saying that this particular time, and I hope and I believe that's the action they're going to take this particular time, because
that's what happened with Mitchell Brown as well.
Correct, but they also, prior to that moment, had already mapped out the map out. Right. It wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't like the candidate that they ran was an unknown. It was a part of the process to say we're going to have Mitchell Brown be this interim, and then this is the candidate that we're running.
Right.
And so it's a similar process that's happening.
Well, because that was right before the new district system was finally implemented, right?
Correct.
So you're actually talking about these are the 3 people that we're going to be running to fill.
Ultimately, yes. Yes. Correct.
The way it all works out.
Correct.
Because
correct.
Here's the real inside baseball. Liz Brown, Shayla Favor, Council President Hardin all lived in the same district.
Correct.
Liz went and got another job.
Yes.
That's the seat that Mitchell Brown took.
Correct.
Council President Hardin moved to be in a different district. Shayla Favor stayed. And then when she left, that's what this appointment was. And the reason why I say 3 is there were 2 brand new council members in addition to somebody that would fill that,
Correct.
It's hard to translate the at-large model to the district model. Yeah,
yes.
In terms of one-to-ones.
Correct. Especially in the last one.
Yeah. So why, if you knew, I am both going to, why both for you? Why were you seeking both the appointment and the election?
You don't know what's going to happen, right?
Okay.
I think that's ultimately it for me. But also,
and so here's the thing I want to get at, though, is you are expressing a little bit of it wasn't okay for them to slot people in and then for them to stay. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay.
100%.
But you were asking for maybe that to happen of your own accord.
No.
Okay.
No, because I wouldn't necessarily be running on a ticket, right? So we also know that, again, Democratic ticket is there.
Right.
And so if that candidate who is interim is the one that they choose to select to run, then they'll be on that ticket.
That slate.
That slate. Excuse me, that slate.
Yeah.
Yes, correct, that slate. So for me,
and to be clear, we're talking about the postcard that
everyone gets in the mail,
party,
right?
the
party
decides to endorse folks, and your perception would have been, because you are not really engaged with the Democratic Party.
I am. I'm not. I mean, I'm engaged tangentially, I suppose. Like, I support.
You don't go to
like
county party meetings.
Correct. I'm correct.
So your thinking was, I don't know what's going to happen in a. I mean, frankly, in an ideal world, let's say you were chosen for the nomination, and the Democratic Party still chose a different person.
Correct.
Would the idea have been to sort of highlight, like, oh, it's not happening that way, but I can still persevere?
And isn't that a beautiful story?
Yeah.
That to me is the most important thing. Or I could not persevere, but the story of Columbus is different. Right? It becomes a totally different story. Like, look at what happened in Columbus. They did not run the incumbent on the slate. Wow. So really politics is happening, like real, and someone else might be inspired to say, oh my gosh, look, I can do that too. Right. Like, I think the belief that the only way to do it is to align yourself with the party is a little bit backwards. I think the belief should be, I'm going to demonstrate my capacity. And if a party wants to call me, hey, call me. Right. Like, hey, give a shot.
I'm happy to have a endorsement.
Oh my
interview.
gosh, how great would that be?
Yeah.
I am happy to have that. And remember, we are nonpartisan right now. I'm here to represent my community. I'm not here to represent a party. I'm literally here to represent my neighbor who's looking for trash pickup to be on time, right? Or to have their streets have salt and ice on them. I'm looking at my neighbors who are saying I'm going to be evicted from my home because the rent prices are going up too quickly. So to me, that is what civic duty is about. It's not aligning to a party. It's aligning to your neighbors and saying, I'm here. And then if the party wants to call and say, we'd love to give you an endorsement, Democrat or Republican Party, wonderful. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely to see that, like, the community has put someone forward that everyone else is saying, yeah, that actually makes good sense.
So
party over politics, I don't know. Politics, it seems kind of crazy.
Back to the process we went through. We all testified.
Yes.
We were told that, I think like a week later, hey, council has decided that they are going to want to do a couple interviews. If you are chosen for these interviews, we will let you know by noon the day that we need you to show up in council chambers. That happened to be the day of a snowstorm, and we were told, hey, we're not going to do this tonight. We're probably going to do it next weekend or next Monday. But, that we weren't told everybody at that point. We were told, we will tell you by Friday if we need you the following Monday.
Got it.
And then that following Friday, 20 minutes after noon, because we were told by noon, we all got an email that said, surprise, we're actually going to interview everybody. And here are, the 2 days that we're going to do interviews, and please fill out this Google form for your availability. I will tell you my feeling. I'm not even going to wait for yours, and you can respond to mine. Go ahead. I was pretty disappointed. Okay. I felt, because I do remember what your reaction was. My feeling was, you guys have not culled the field at all. This is all still very open. If I would love the honor to move forward, of course, but I would also kind of like to, if I'm not going to be in this anymore, just let me out. You don't have to give me one more interview. Again, honored to do it. Good conversation. Love getting in front of those folks. You were excited.
Yeah, 100%.
When the pool stayed open. You were like, well, I still got a chance. I'm still in this.
Well, it was even less. It was less that belief that I was still in it, but more, I have an opportunity to share more of my story.
Okay.
Right. Like that opportunity to sit down in front of council and say, these are the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing was essential to me. This is the thing about when people aren't at the table. I was at the table. I had a chance to sit at the table with every council person and say, this is why I think what you're doing is wrong. This is why I have an interest in being a part of this team. And this is how I think you can be better. Like, isn't that a freaking amazing opportunity? So I was excited about it, right? Other than having 3 minutes where I also got cut off early. I'm not going to get into that one, right? That buzzer came on and I was like, are you kidding me? No one else got a buzzer, and that's totally rude and inappropriate, but that's a whole nother thing. But right, for me, it was like, I just had an opportunity to sit down in a room, 10 minutes with counselors and talk about and give them some input. They had questions. I had really direct answers, and that was great. But I also felt like this, again, I'm a communications person, and hopefully they leaned into it, but I haven't seen them lean into it yet. What a great story to tell, right? When your community is saying, we thought this was what's going to happen, and then look at what happened. Maybe there was some indecision in the room. Maybe we couldn't come to a conclusion of what we wanted to do, but isn't that
you and I both agree that that's why they didn't call the field anymore. Correct. They simply weren't in agreement of who are the smaller number of final finalists.
Correct.
And then they just said, okay, we'll just keep the field where it is.
It's probably also, I think, when you are thinking about communications, they're probably also thinking about what's the response going to be. Right? Like what would be the community response if we pick X or if we pick X? Right. But also, what is the perception? I mean, I went in there and said very loudly, I said, look, I think about all of the things. I'm a queer black man. You already got one of those on council. Can you have two? And I was like, well, you can.
Yeah.
You can. But I said, but I also know what perception looks like. I said, I also know that I walked up to give my 3-minute testimony and I was staring at 3 black men.
Yeah.
Can you have 3? Can you have 4 now? Well, you can.
Apparently you can.
You can, right? Because before, when you had all cis white men, no one said anything. So can't you have more of the same thing? Which to me was also a moment of where I believe there may have been some validation for the rest of the folks in the room to say, oh yeah, we can actually. So maybe we don't have to pick a black female in this moment. We can pick someone else who looks different than what we think. Because intersectional identities are important. Again, I may walk into a room and people may see a black man, but I'm a queer black man, but I'm also a queer black new American.
Right.
Like right, and I exist on a gender binary, right? I exist in this space of non-binaryism. Like I don't male, female, whatever. I use all of these languages to describe myself. So I'm not the same as the rest of you sitting right there on council, and therefore I actually represent more voices in the community. My 8-year-old daughter is a black woman. Trust me. Well, she's a girl. She's going to be a woman soon, right? But I can speak for my daughter, right? She empowers me, and I have to think about her. So I can think about black women because I had a mother who was a black woman, right? So I don't think the comment of saying we have to see them here, right, means that they're not going to be represented here. Now, I do think visual representation matters.
Absolutely.
So if that's a thing, then say that. To see a black woman on council is important.
Yes.
But to know that we are doing the work for all black women, that's important as well. So
If not more.
So
Right.
whether you have one sitting there, you should always be able to do the work for the community that you need to serve.
And did they address the fact that you were planning on running again? Did they just sort of say like,
Oh no, there was no one asked until the very end, and I thank the council member for asking who did. And it was like, well, you are saying that you're going to run again, and what if we don't pick you to be the person on the slate? I said, that's okay.
so the slate was acknowledged?
Yeah, the slate was acknowledged. The
Okay.
slate was acknowledged. And I said, that's okay. That's okay. I said, wow, what a great story, again, to tell in the community. Now, that's going to be for the Democrats to deal with. If
Right.
they're going to say, well, we're not picking this person, and then that's going to be a story you have to deal with the community. But that's still a great story to tell to me,
Yeah.
right, that we didn't automatically pick the incumbent, and now the incumbent has to run on their own. Wow. What an amazing, really...
I think the thing that keeps getting muddied
so
for me that I tried to convey to them in my interview was the appointment that they were doing was a civic process, or should be, right? And that the person who gets endorsed for the ballot in the fall is a political process and not one that should be happening in City Hall. They should be happening in your advisors or around your kitchen table.
Correct.
That is totally fine.
Correct.
And I don't think they muddied it necessarily. I think they decided not to muddy it because there would have been some perception. It just that timeline of that story to tell it would have been too long for them to. It would have been assumed, I think, if they had appointed you, that if you continue to pursue your candidacy, that it would have been perceived as, without the party even having a chance to weigh in, it would have been perceived as, well, they just put up somebody who's going to be a seat sitter. But
Yeah. Well,
I think we both know that likely is not what would have happened because...
I also told them I'm running as an independent, so
Okay.
I did say that in the meeting. I said I'm running as an independent, so that makes it easier for you to run someone else against me.
Well, and the thing that I don't think has been said publicly, but is a very poorly kept secret, is the party has actually already identified the person that they have been collecting signatures for, that they are going to, I would perceive, I don't think it's a done deal, the endorsement.
Correct.
I don't know if an endorsement will happen before the primary in April or May.
The primary's in May.
In May.
Yeah.
But Tiara Ross is running
Yes.
and did not seek appointment.
Correct.
As of right now, our understanding is that there are 4 total candidates. There might be 3.
There might be 3.
But the other ones,
Yes.
other than Tiara Ross, all of them sought appointment.
Yes.
Yes. It's you. Jesse Vogel, who also sought nomination. And then there's some question. There's a 4th person that I'm not going to say their name because I don't know if they're actually running. My perception is they're going to be at that panel at the end of February, but signatures are due on February 5th. So we'll find out.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how all of it went?
I feel good.
Okay.
I mean, look, I think it is, and as I said to the council, I'm appreciative of the discourse that has happened in the community. And whether it's like 2 people or 20 people or 200 people who've been talking about it, something different has happened.
Yeah.
And as I said to them, and again, people's memories are short. The story of Columbus politics or whatever it is may have a little bit of a bump, right? Someone may be inspired, right? A 13-year-old or a 22-year-old or even a 40-year-old may be inspired to say, you know what? I really appreciated seeing all of this, a glimpse of what happened, and now I'm going to do something different, right? I have friends who have paid attention to this process, and they've said, I've never been involved in local politics like this until now.
Yeah.
How amazing is that? I think that to me is what this is all about more. To inspire our community to be engaged in politics, in the civics of it all is amazing, right? We are growing so rapidly as a city. And so if we are not prepared for what we're going to be on the other side, and the way preparation happens is by being knowledgeable about the present, understanding the present so that the future doesn't kick you in the butt, right? Like, and so that's what I'm excited about, is that this process, I think, hopefully has inspired people to look a little bit deeper into what's happening here in Columbus, to consider what their power is in this moment, and then to realize we are in a new system that has districts, right? And representation means something more so than it ever did. I grew up in New York City. This is new. This is what I'm used to, right? Like, we had boroughs and we had sub neighborhoods and all these things. So here we are finally growing up, right? Like, and we are entering these little tween years, and we need to be prepared, because what's coming down the pike is going to require more civic engagement. What's going to come down the pike is going to require more people bubbling up from these communities in the districts saying, I'm ready to represent my area.
Yeah.
Because Columbus is not going to get less complicated. It's just going to become more complicated and complex. So be prepared.
And I will say, just for those listening that are like, oh, this was interesting, now I don't need to go to the panel discussion. There was a lot of inside baseball we did. That's what I wanted to do. I don't know what I'm calling the episode yet. It's probably going to be some version of like, so we sought nomination, or like, so you want to run for council. That the panel discussion at the end of the month, I actually spoke with the organizers yesterday, and we were talking about the process, and very quickly I was told that's way too inside baseball. This is not what civic engagement is about. It's about what are the problems that the community faces, and what and how, who will be the best candidate to help address it. So,
well, I mean, but I think the inside baseball helps, right?
It does.
The information. So
how did that happen?
Correct. Right. So, you know, which has been helpful for me to understand the past so that I can, again, prepare for the future. If I didn't get that deep into understanding and knowing council members for the last several years, and by meaning knowing, I mean not necessarily getting to know as I did, but also just literally opening up the internet, right? And looking back at who was on council, where did they transition, where did they come from, like all of that stuff. If you are ready and prepared to be engaged in the civics of your community, then you should know the history of it. You should know who came before you, and then be able to understand how you can leverage your talents to do better for the community, right? So those are the things that I study. Those are the things that I understand. And I think in the conversation, hopefully, that we have, it's going to be fruitful and engaging later on in February. I think that's when we talk about, right, what have we done? Right. That's when we can get into the meat and potatoes of what have we done and how do we see ourselves doing the work. That will be a very different conversation, because I think it also will be, hopefully, what has inspired us to do the work and what keeps us doing the work that we're doing. That is going to be a really important question. That is hopefully where people can say, I see you, and yeah, I'm going to vote for you, right? Not just because you understand the inside, the politics of it, but what I'm hearing from you in this moment is that you understand the humanity of the community that you're prepared to serve, right? Not that you understand the politics of the party that has called you or said that you need to be part of it, or that you understand the politics of government. You'll figure
that's
that
helpful,
out, right?
but yeah.
In that moment, in this moment, right, it's to understand civic duty, which is my service to you, my community member. How can I help you, as I say to people often, find the joy that I think we are all trying to find?
Densil, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Confluence Cast presented by Columbus Underground. Again, you can get more information on what we discussed today in the show notes for this episode at theconfluencecast.com. Please rate, subscribe, share this episode of the Confluence Cast with your friends, family, contacts, enemies, your favorite advocate. If you're interested in sponsoring the Confluence Cast, get in touch with us. We can be reached by email at info@theconfluencecast.com. Our theme music was composed by Benji Robinson. Our producer is Philip Cogley. I'm your host, Tim Fulton. Have a great week.